Hi, good afternoon, everyone. From the entire staff of the Recreation Grants Branch here in Austin, Texas, I'd like to welcome you all and thank you for taking time from your day to attend this afternoon's Local Park Active Grant Management webinar. My name is Dan Reese, and I'm the Local Park Grant Program Manager here at Texas Parks and Wildlife. And you're all here this afternoon because you either have an active local park grant or you've recently been awarded a state-funded new grant. Let me start by congratulating all of the new grant recipients on your new grant. You guys have all successfully made your way through the application process, and now it's time to have some fun. So for those of you who have previously administered grants to our program, you know that we would typically be having this presentation in person here at our offices in Austin. And we'll certainly miss seeing everyone today, but unfortunately we're just not quite back in a position to fill up the conference room again just yet. But with that said, we would like to keep this afternoon's webinar interactive, and we encourage you all to type in your questions throughout the presentation. For those of you who are not familiar with the GoToWebinar format, you'll see a little control panel there on the right side of your screen, and within the questions area is where we are asking you to please type in your questions. And just throughout the presentation, anytime a question arises, please feel free to type that in, and we'll do our best to address those just while the presentation is, as we're moving our way through all the slides. Additionally, we will plan on making a recording of today's presentation available, as well as a PDF of the PowerPoint presentation. These will be available on our website, Rec Grants Online, or Argo 2020, and these can be found in the Local Park Resources section of that website. For those of you who are unfamiliar with any of this terminology, rest assured we'll cover Argo as well as our available online resources in more detail throughout this afternoon's webinar. So here's a little bit of what we have planned for you this afternoon. First, I'll run through some introductions and just some initial welcome slides. Then I'll pass the baton over to Blake Powers, and he'll run through Rec Grants Online and some of the initial tasks you'll need to take when setting up your projects and administering your projects using Argo. Then our fiscal team will jump in, and they'll cover all of your fiscal related project management tasks. We'll take a short break after that for about 10 minutes. And then the local park team, the remainder of the local park team will jump on, and we'll cover all of your programmatic requirements and responsibilities. Again, we'll open the virtual floor up for questions at the end of the presentation, but I am encouraging you all to please type your questions in along the way, and we'll just address those in real time. So I'll introduce a little bit of the management team here first. Dana Lagarde is the Director of Rec Grants. Many of you have probably spoken with Dana or worked with her in her previous capacities on the co-op team or the local park team. That's me on the top right there, Dan Reese. Again, I'm the manager of the local park program here. Blake Powers, who you'll be hearing from next, is our business systems and communication administrator. And that's Pam Cavey there on the bottom right. She's our fiscal manager. Pam will also be joined by the remainder of the fiscal team as they present the fiscal portion of the presentation, and she'll make those introductions as she starts her portion. One second, please. There we go. Sorry about that, folks. And then here's the remainder of the local park team, the dream team. These are the folks that get all the work done on the local park team. By now, you've probably all heard from your local park coordinator several times and probably met with them at your park site. Your local park coordinator will be your primary point of contact throughout the life of your local park grant. Aaron, Susan, and Matt have all been with the program for a number of years now, and I know they'll do a fantastic job working with you throughout the life of your grant. And you'll see there on the bottom right, we do currently have a vacancy on the local park team. We're just about through with the process of filling that position and look to add a compliance coordinator to the team in the very near future. And again, thank you all. I encourage you all to type your questions in again. And at this point, this concludes my portion, and I'm going to pass the baton over to Blake.
Hey everybody, my name is Blake Powers. I'm the systems administrator here with Recreation Grants. My role with the department and my role with helping you in your grant is that I design and maintain the Argo 2020 grant management system. Today we're just going to talk about the very basic elements that you'll need to manage a grant in Argo 2020, and I'm going to help you think conceptually about how to do that in a way that will help you sort of answer your own questions. And when you don't know the answers to those questions, you can reach out to us. We're going to talk about a few things, but first of all, we're just going to talk about what Argo 2020 is. Argo 2020 is a grant management portal that allows us to take the project all the way from the application phase to the completion of your grant project. It even allows us to manage your project's post-completion. Many of you have responsibilities after the grant is completed. The project, the parkland has to be dedicated in perpetuity. There are sometimes different things that happen after the projects are closed. The system can accommodate that too. One of the key things to remember in Argo 2020 is that applications in the system belong to sponsor organizations and not individual users. In the old system, you signed up with an email address and the project really just belonged to whoever the user was that set the project up. In the new system, in order to have a better audit trail, better security, and better preservation of data for posterity, for those folks that may come after you in your positions, the application actually belongs to the sponsor organization, and you are merely a user that manages the application in whatever role that you might have. The sponsor administrators for the organization can add and remove users from the larger organization and from the applications themselves. And I'm going to show you where these resources are, but today I want you to think about concepts, right? So what we know is this is our project management system for your awarded project. There are really 4 key things that you're going to do in the system, and that's it. That's all you're going to need to remember to manage a grant. The first one is you're going to need to use the project elements form. For those of you that ever had a grant in the old system, you'll remember that when you logged in, you had a big list of tasks to complete. That's what the project elements form is in the new system, okay? This is going to be the form that our grant teams are going to be able to add tasks to. You're going to be able to access that form, click a link to the task to see a copy of the form that you either have to complete or instructions for how to complete the task. And then in the new system, you'll upload some kind of proof that the task has been completed. That may be the form itself, it may be an acknowledgement that you've received the notification, but whatever it is, this form is going to give you an opportunity to see what you need to do and then to provide verification that you've done it, okay? We're going to walk through that. I'm not going to slow the presentation down too much today with my part because all the resources are available in our Argo 2020 system, and I'm going to show you those in practicality. But for now, I want you to remember the project elements form is where you complete the tasks that are unique to your project, okay? For most of you, the first 2 tasks that you're going to have in this system are to provide an AP 15210s form and a direct deposit form. Those are going to be important for you to provide because that's how you're actually going to be reimbursed. But our fiscal team will verify those types of forms, And then depending on the kind of grant you have, you may also get some other tasks added to this form, but you'll definitely have those two added likely before anything else. And what will happen is when an item is added to that form, you'll receive an email from the system that says, hey, you've got something to do. It will tell you the name of the task. It will tell you the application it belongs to. You'll use that information to log into the system, find the project elements form for that project, and then upload the item. Like I say, at the conclusion of this, we're going to run through an area that has all these resources, and I'll show you where you can find them, okay? So number one, project elements form. Number two, signing your grant agreement. Okay, that's going to be pretty important. Once a grant agreement is prepared in the system, you're going to use the agreement signatures form to download all of the required forms that go with the grant agreement and the primary grant agreement itself. Okay, so when you click on this link to PDF, link to agreement PDF that you see here, and I'm going to show you this screen again when we're looking at. Well, what I'm going to do is direct you to the video, but when you pull up the agreement signatures form, there's going to be a link to PDF button. That's going to produce the main part of the grant agreement that you need to sign. In addition, there are going to be some attachments listed for you. Sometimes these attachments are things that are reference points. So it may be an approved budget. It may be some type of document like instructions for approved projects, right? Other of these documents are going to be things that you actually need to sign in addition to the primary grant agreement form, okay? So you're going to want to pay attention to how those attachments are listed and described. And if you have any questions, you're going to want to reach out to your grant coordinator, because when you return the grant agreement, you're going to need to scan all of the signed forms into one PDF and upload them on this agreement signatures form. There is one key element in the new system, and our resources detail this. In the new system, whenever you have done something and you're ready for our staff to review it, you're going to have to use the status change feature, okay? That is a little bit different. In the old system, there was a big submit button at the end of every form. The downside to that, though, is it created hundreds and hundreds of versions of forms every time, and it also created fake notifications for things that weren't actually complete. It was just creating notifications whenever you click the save button. In this system, you can click the save button 100 times. That's not going to tell our staff that this is ready to look at. What's going to tell our staff that this is ready to review is once you status change it for them, that's going to create the notification that tells them, hey, the sponsor has returned the grant agreement, it's ready to review, okay? So you're going to sign your grant agreement in the system, and then you're going to do your quarterly reports in the system, okay? Those are required for every project. All right. Unlike the old system, you're not even going to have to remember to start one yourself. The new system is going to start one for you at the beginning of every quarter, or rather at the end of every quarter after you sign your grant agreement. Okay. So for those of you that sign a grant agreement this month sometime on October the 1st, a quarterly status report for quarter 3 is going to generate for you to fill out and complete in the system. The system is going to email you that it's been created, and then you'll just use the system to submit it. Now, in the old system, quarterly reports were the same as notices to proceed with construction, which were the same as Texas Historical Commission clearance. Everything was a task, right? Everything was something to be done. The system didn't really care about the difference between uploading an appraisal form or uploading a grant agreement. In this system, though, there are core features of the system, and the quarterly reports are part of the core features, all right? And what that basically means is they're going to have their own unique document set. So what's going to be nice for you is if you're coming onto a project that you've been managing or somebody else comes on board, you're going to be able to see every quarterly report that's ever been completed for the project separately. And you'll be able to identify very easily which is which, okay? So we'll look a little bit at that. I'm not going to belabor that too much, because these resources in the system are very detailed and have been constructed to walk you through all these processes, okay? The main thing that you're going to want to do over the course of managing your grant is to request reimbursement. That's kind of the point of getting a grant, is to be able to be paid for the services provided in the grant management process. So this system, unlike the old system, payments and reimbursements are also embedded in the system, okay? And there are some really nice improvements in the new system. Number one, when you go to create a reimbursement request, you're going to see what your available balance is. okay? That's going to be a big deal for a lot of you because prior to this, you would have had to be keeping track of that yourself. Our old system did not provide that, or you would have had to reach out to our fiscal team. So at this time, if your project begins in Argo 2020 and completes the grant management lifecycle, every time you go create a payment request, you're going to be able to see how much is left for you to be paid, how much match that's required is left for you to provide, and any kinds of those things in the budget. You'll be able to see the subcategories that have already been paid money or provided match. Again, there is a very thorough guide to the reimbursement process. Our fiscal team is going to review that a little bit more. But essentially, you're going to be able to submit your reimbursement. You're going to be able to provide updated information should our staff need it. You'll be able to sign your certification letter. And then at some point in the process, you'll be able to see a budget summary that tells you not only how much has been paid, but how much is left in each subcategory. So again, a lot of nice detailed features for managing the financial elements of your grant in this system that did not exist in the old system, okay? And then finally, you're going to request an amendment, right? So after you signed your grant agreement, which was part of the slide presentation, you're providing required tasks in the project elements form. You're requesting payments directly through the integrated features of the system, or you're submitting a quarterly report through the integrated features of the system, or you're asking for an amendment through the integrated features of the system. Those are the main things to know. After you sign your grant agreement, those 4 things, that's what you're doing, okay? And on this amendment revision request form, this form will get you familiar with status changing in the system. You'll have to status change your project into the amendment request area. And after you've done that, you'll be able to complete the form sets that are associated with that. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to pull over to my screen real quickly. Okay. So what we're going to look at here is just a little bit of what what I was referencing before. When you go to the Argo 2020 grant management system, even before you've done anything, there's a link that says resources, okay? In these resources, you're going to find lots of programmatic stuff, and you've already dealt with that over the course of working with your application. That's also where this webinar and where the PowerPoint are going to be located, right? So everybody's familiar with these local park grant resources. But backing up, if you scroll down to the area that says awarded active project resources, this is how you manage your grant in Argo 2020, okay? It's really key to read these things because they're very detailed and they will walk you through screen by screen everything that you need to do to complete these processes, okay? But what we were talking about before, for example, how to sign your grant agreement, right? This is going to be a video where you'll hear me talking, and I won't belabor that, but that's not me, by the way, that was a commercial. But this will be a video. The reimbursement request guide, little complicated for a video, and I've also found that people like to refer back to specific points. So in this guide, it shows you how to initiate a reimbursement request, right? It shows you the form, how to access and complete the form, right? It shows you how to find the parent and then the child. In this case, every reimbursement that you create will be a child of your main project, right? It will show you what's left on the form. It will show you how to fill out the spreadsheet, right? How to bill against cost categories. It's all very detailed. This is important to read because what you don't want to happen is to submit a reimbursement request where you haven't read the guide and then it sits in the queue for a little while, and by the time our staff gets to it, you haven't done what you needed to do, so it just protracts the amount of time it would take you to get paid. So, this is definitely a guide you want to review in advance. Even without, this does not advise you on the programmatic elements of a reimbursement request, but remember the core features of the data that you need to provide are the same, right? You need to provide information about when you've been invoiced, how you've paid, and then the associated receipts, invoices. Those are just some basic key components that derail a lot of reimbursement requests, okay? So you just want to pay attention. You'll also want to pay attention to Section 3. submitting your request or status changing your request in the system, this is a constant element in the new system. Get used to this. But these guides walk you through these things with this level of detail. Okay, that goes forth for the quarterly report guide. This is also a PDF, and you'll see this is exactly the same thing. It's screen by screen. It shows you exactly where to click, and I can't tell you the number of questions that I get that are covered in the guide. There hasn't been anything omitted, and oftentimes I'll just wind up emailing screenshots from the guide to answer the question. So take some time and review these resources. They're all that detailed, and if you do that, you're going to be on track to manage your grant in the Argo 2020 grant management system. Now, I haven't been monitoring the chat while I've been doing this portion of the presentation, but what I can tell you is that the questions are logged, and after the webinar is over, I will review those questions, and I will answer those via email if needed. But review the Argo 2020 resources, and most of the questions about how to use the system programmatically will be answered. Let me see. Next. Okay. Again, you can use this PowerPoint to go directly to some of these resources, the local park grants program resources, right? The Quick Start User Guide for Argo 2020 just shows you how to manage your sponsor organization, how to add and remove people. You can always reach out to us if you need help with that. And then the Awarded Active Project Resources is the most important piece that is a companion to our webinar today. If you review how to do those main things, you'll be able to manage pretty much any task that comes up for you in the system. So that's the end of my part of the presentation. So I'm going to pass things along to our fiscal program manager, Pam Cavey.
Greetings and welcome to the webinar. I would like to present to you the fiscal team, and this is the team that's going to assist you with reimbursements, appraisals, and we're going to talk a little bit about sharing some tips to help you through the process and to navigate through Argo 2020. So I'd like to present Marcy has been with Direct Grants for 8.5 years. Not only is she our auditor, but she's also our resident appraisal expert. And she will either review or coordinate with our contract reviewer for all appraisals. So if you have a project that requires some appraisal, Marcy will be your contact and will be the one you will be working with. She will be providing a little bit of a quick overview of the appraisal process. Michael has been with Direct Grants for going on 3 years now. He is going to provide you with an overview of the reimbursement process and give you some tips to make the process a little easier to navigate. Following his presentation, he's going to give some tips for success that I think will be very helpful for you to remember as you navigate through the process that might make your reimbursement process a little bit easier and a little bit more quicker through the system. Mary Helen has been with the team for just over 1.5 years. She is primary auditor for our co-op program and doesn't work a whole lot with local parks at this point, but she has been auditing reimbursements in the new Argo system more than any of us, and she has become our official train the trainer resource. Any one of our team will be able to answer any questions that you have through the reimbursement process. And myself, I'm Pam Cavey. I am the fiscal manager with the team, and I've been here for just at 2 years. And let me tell you, it has been a learning period. And I am very excited about Argo 2020 and the tools and the resources it's going to put at your fingertips. I've been doing grants and working on the fiscal side for nearly 30 years, and this is a fabulous tool. So I encourage you to look at the resources. You're going to hear us say that a lot through the afternoon and through your life span within Argo 2020. But the resources that are available there at your fingertips are pretty impressive and will answer any questions that you might have. I'm going to review a few project management elements. And as you know, you have both pre-agreement elements and some post-agreement elements. And Blake has already touched base on the two documents that are fiscally related that are in your pre-agreement elements are your Texas identification number, your what was also called the Form AP 152, and the direct deposit, Form 176. Many of you have already completed these forms as part of the pre-agreement process, but I just wanted to share that there's times that these forms may also become part of your post-agreement when you're actually working within the project. The AP 152 is a document that is your official name and address document. Don't anticipate too many people changing their names, but we do have times when your address, your official address changes. Maybe you're fortunate to move into a brand new building. But if you need to submit a change of address, it is done through the AP 152 post-award, even if you have already completed this up front. This is your official address change document. What I would like to remind you and point out is the AP 152, if you have direct deposit, the addresses must match. So if you have signed up for direct deposit and then you do change your address after award, you will also need to submit a new direct deposit authorization, because within the address match system, when we submit your payment, the comptroller system will look at your remittance address and it will match that up with an address that's on file for direct deposit. So if you have, So if you have the direct deposit form, I just want to point out that, again, this is linked directly to the AP 152. So make sure the addresses are identical. And we do see this to be a challenge sometimes, that if you submit your AP 152 with a PO box as your official address, but maybe the address with your bank is a street address, if you submit a direct deposit that has a different address than what's on your AP 152, it will not match up in this system. So I just want to point that out, that if you have direct deposit, the address is much, and if you change your address, you must also submit a new direct correlating document. As you complete the direct deposit form, I'd like to draw your attention to box section 5. This is a box that does require a check mark, either yes or no, related to the Patriot Act, which is a national requirement. And failure to check this box will result in an automatic rejection of this form. And we do have that happen quite a bit. I try to check the forms when they come in. So just a tip, make sure your section 5 box is always checked on a direct deposit form. As Blake has shared with you, project elements is where you will be, it's kind of like the repository for documents and tasks. What we used to call tasks are now elements that we would ask of you. Currently, our project elements are located within the local parks, the grant coordination area. As we roll out new iterations of Argo 2020, anticipate in the future that we're going to have a fiscal elements box where you will find all the forms that you would need as it relates to fiscal. Another point I'd like to touch base on is the process of construction contracts. Many of your projects are large and do require a construction contract. that is going to require most likely a competitive bid process. As we discuss this and as we start this after you get your award, please keep in mind that the procurement transactions will be conducted in a manner that provides full and open competition. So when we ask for documents that's related to your bid process, it is for us to confirm that you truly are maintaining an open and full competitive process. We also would like to say at this point the actual procurement of things outside of the construction contracts will be based on what your policy is within your entity. We are not requiring extra procurement policies, but we ask that you have to follow your own procurement policies with regards to thresholds and stuff, with the exception of the few that we have outlined. A few of you may elect to participate in the local government purchasing cooperative. Many of you may know that as Blackboard, in lieu of a sealed bid procurement process. There are additional requirements to participating in Blackboard that we will be asking for if this is a route you choose to go down. I am going to advise that before you take that route is that you reach out to either myself or to your grant coordinator, and they will put you in contact with me, and we will go over this on an individual basis. Because one of the first things I'm going to ask for is that you have authority, procurement purchasing authority by your own policy or by your governing body that allows you to participate in the cooperative. And you will also have to provide an executed interlocal agreement between yourself, your entity, and the cooperative. So there are some special rules that goes along with that. Rather than going into them, because there's such a few, the percentage of people who actually go down this route is very small. But please, if this is something you are going to look into, reach out to us for some special guidance. But if you're going to go the normal route, your construction contracts are procured through a sealed bid process. We require formal and public advertisement for invitation for bids. All bids are publicly opened at prescribed time and place. Develop and maintain a bid tabulation sheet of all bids open. And very important, if you do not select your low bid, it will require some sound documented reason as to why that was not your selected bidder. So that's just some reminders of construction contracts. At this point, I'd like to also kind of touch base a little bit on contract change orders. Before you sign a construction change order that would include a scope change, a project cost increase, or completion date extension, please clear it with your grant coordinator and stay in contact with them to make sure that you're not going to run up against any issues within the terms of your grant of any of these. So please stay in contact with your grant coordinator before you sign any change orders. If you do sign a change order, please complete and upload a copy of it into the project elements. Some change orders may require a review of your approved budget summary and other issues related to your grant management. So it is very important that you stay in contact before you commit to a change order after we've already approved the bid process for that contractor. And please remember that the contract change order does not change your project agreement that you have signed with Texas Parks and Wildlife. So if you sign a change order and it possibly conflicts with the project agreement you've signed with us, the project agreement will take precedence over it with regards to reimbursing your grant. On your construction contracts, we would ask that you could just kind of do a little bit of a checklist. just to make sure that your construction-related documents always include the project number and project name. And we would have to have these in your project elements prior to approving your first reimbursement. And that's proof that we have the public invitation for bids, which should be a tear sheet that shows the posting, the bid tabulation sheet, including documentation of low bid not selected, and the signed contract itself. And again, submissions through the Argo 2020 project elements form. At this point, I am going to let Marcy take the chair, and she's going to walk you through some of the appraisals process. Good afternoon. My name is Marcy Cavazos Colunga, and I will be giving you a brief overview of the appraisal process for local park grant projects. So if you have a grant project that includes land acquisition, you'll need to submit an appraisal report for review. This will be based on your original grant application, and it will be outlined in your land acquisition schedule. To check to see if you have to submit one, you'll want to navigate to the project elements section in the new system, or Argo 2020. Once you are in project elements, look at your required project elements to be uploaded. If an appraisal report is required for your project, it will be listed here with all of your other required elements. This is where you will need to upload your appraisal report, and it will trigger the appraisal review process. Today's webinar is for state grants, so you'll be submitting a regular, quote, standard appraisal. Once you submit your report for review, these are the components we will be looking for in the appraisal report. Your appraiser is familiar with all of these standard components in an appraisal report. It makes a big difference if you provide your appraiser with this checklist. So that's the tip here. Provide this to your appraiser. After our initial appraisal review, you will get a system-generated notification letting you know whether your appraisal report was either approved or is on hold. If it has not been accepted, we will let you know what needs to be remedied in the report for it to be accepted. At this point, you will want to talk with your appraiser to revise the report to remedy those deficient items. Here are the top 3 most common reasons that it might not get approved when you submit it. So talk to your appraiser to update and revise the appraisal report to include the missing items in the appraisal report. Once you receive your updated report from your appraiser, you will need to upload the new revised report in the same area in the system where you originally uploaded the report. This will start the review process again, where we will look to see if the updated report is now satisfactory. Once the revised report is received and accepted, you will receive a system-generated notification letting you know that your appraisal has been approved. This will complete your appraisal requirement at this point. If you are wondering how long the appraisal process is, the short answer is it depends. If the appraisal is close to perfect the first time it gets submitted, it might get accepted. If it is not uncommon to get your appraisal approved the first time it gets submitted. So don't worry, it sometimes happens. If that is the case, it will depend on how quickly your appraiser completes the updated report. That's it for appraisal. Thank you. And now Mike will talk to you about the appraisal process in the new system.
Okay, thank you, Marcy. Okay, sorry. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. As it's already been mentioned, my name is Michael Garza, and I'm one of the auditors that you will be in contact with whenever you submit your reimbursement request. First, I'll give you an overview of the key pieces of documentation you will need to successfully request reimbursement from the TPWD RET grants. I'll also show you where to locate your reimbursement request guide in Argo 2020 for future reference. So before I show you where your resource guide is, the key items in the reimbursement package for every reimbursement you send will always consist of a budget summary, a billing matrix, the invoices and proof of payment for whatever expenses or costs you're submitting, the force account and equipment documentation, which is pretty much timesheets from any staff you have working on any grant related items, and any equipment usage for the grant as well. And then finally, the certification page, which is the last thing you'll do before you submit it. Okay, so as I said just a minute ago, I'll show you where to find your resource guide. As you can see at the bottom of the screen, that's the header for the new RET grant, the Argo 2020. You'll click the Argo 2020 resources link. That's under that's above the above the red arrow, and then that will take you over here. And you'll go down. You'll scroll down to number 6, which is the Argo 2020 awarded/active project resource, and that's the guide that you'll be using to reference whenever you're submitting a reimbursement request. Okay. So the budget summary within Argo 2020. The budget summary within Argo 2020 is now an integrated form that will auto-populate with the approved budget elements of your project. The sample I have on screen on the right is something I provided just to give you an idea of what it look like. As you can see under professional services, if you have any, they'll be listed there, and then any construction elements will be listed under C, and it'll automatically total at the bottom for total project cost. And on the TPW use only side, that's where we approve whether or not that's where we approve however much you're requesting, or if there's any disallowance, we'll put it in there as well. And then next is the billing matrix. So the billing matrix it's similar to the budget summary in that it's integrated in the system, and all you will have to do is just fill in the lines that you see at the bottom for like whatever budget items you're claiming for your reimbursement request, and you have to put in the identifying information such as activity date, vendor, the invoice date, and then the invoice reference number, and then you have to declare what kind of payment type it is, whether it's a check, cash, credit card, ACH, or any method of payment, and then the payment reference number next to that, and then the little drop-down menu for cost category is where you would select whatever applicable budget element the expense is being charged to. And then you'll complete this billing matrix for every reimbursement you submit, and including construction apps, which I will get to in a second. But every expense that comes through here will require the proof of payment, which, like as I mentioned a few minutes ago, or a few seconds ago, will require different things. So, like for like a check, you will need a front and back scan that shows that it was paid and processed by the bank. For any credit card transactions or electronic funds transactions, that require a bank statement or a credit card statement as well to show that the payment is cleared using your in-house resources, your funding. And then any cash transactions we can accept as well, but you need to provide a petty cash transaction log to show the inflows and outflows of your petty cash to show where the money's coming from. So next is the force account, which is essentially the timesheets and equipment usage. The timesheets and payroll registers are required for projects with approved personnel budget lines, and it's similar to the equipment. I just posted a sample of our standardized form that we offer to sponsors. Just note that this is not required if you have your own. You just have to make sure to provide the same information that listed here on your version. And as long as you can provide that, we can accept your version, just so that everything needs to be complete and identifiable. Okay, and then as I mentioned a few slides ago, the pay apps, they're similar in that they're pay apps, but they include all the expenses. But just because of how large they are and how many transactions they contain, they're done they take like an extra they take an extra step. So the things that we look out for in pay apps more often for whenever you submit them are the payment application date, the payment application number, the contract total, the total amount completed, and then the amount held for retainage and the certified amount due. Keep in mind, whenever a pay app is provided for reimbursement, be sure to include the schedule to identify which costs are being claimed. Pay apps are very large and they include costs that may or may not be applicable to your grant. And by including this schedule and identifying the costs that are applicable, this will speed up the review of your pay app and avoid unnecessary delays in the audit process. Okay, and then finally, you'll have the certification page, which if you had a previous grant with this will look very familiar to you. The only thing that's different about this version is that it will auto-populate in the system as well, and it won't auto-populate until the review is done. That way we'll know exactly how much you're receiving. If anything's disallowed, you'll know ahead of time, and you'll know exactly what you're getting before you sign off on it. And whenever this certification page is ready for you, you'll receive an email notification when when it's ready to be downloaded, signed, and status changed to move the reimbursement to the next stage. And also, if it hasn't been already mentioned, per your grant agreement, you will always receive 50% of the gross cost you have, unless you have any match that you're providing. But that's another topic for it's a whole another can of worms. But basically, whatever expenses you're going to be requesting, just know that you'll be eligible to receive up to 50% of them. Okay, and then to recap on things I touched on, because I know it was quite a bit of information in a short amount of time, you will fill out the built-in budget summary and billing matrix completely. You will provide invoices, pay apps, receipts, and proof of payment for all costs related to the grant in the same order listed in on your billing matrix. Proof of payment may consist of checks, electronic funds transfer, procurement cards, credit cards, and detailed cash receipts. Make sure bank records are provided to prove that the charges in question have been paid with your resources, with sponsor resources. And then submit your certification form as soon as possible with the correct amount when you receive notification to complete it. And then, as Pam mentioned earlier about the tips for success, these are the infamous tips for success. So you would submit your reimbursement for the best way to administer your grant and for you to receive your money timely. You should always submit your reimbursement request within a timely manner. Organize the supported documentation in the same order listed on the matrix with proof of payment immediately following each proof of cost, so we don't have to dig around any documentation for too long. And then remember to save after uploading the supporting documentation. Remember to status change when submitting the reimbursement request and after uploading the signed certification page. And then utilize the Argo 2020 resource guide that I showed you earlier. And then call us directly if you need any assistance before submitting a partially complete request. And this would be the time for any follow-up questions you have right now before we move on, if you have any. Okay. Are we... All good? Okay. All right. If there's something else, we'll go ahead and take a 10-minute break and we will get back with the rest of the presentation. Thank you so much for your time.
All right, well, welcome back, everybody. We're going to continue on with our active grant management webinar for our state-funded grants. We're going to transition now. We're going to go into the programmatic side, the things that we're going to need to see and the tasks we're going to need to accomplish in order to facilitate your grant. So for this next section, we're first going to talk about a little bit more about the grant agreement process and what that's going to look like for you all. And then we'll go into the individual tasks. We have a ton of different tasks. It really depends on what type of project you are, what the scope is. So not all the tasks will be applicable to everybody on the webinar, but we're going to try to go through at least the ones that are required for every project. And we'll mention some that may be more applicable to your project or maybe not. And then the last thing we'll do is we'll go over the amendment process in case there is a change that needs to happen while you're in active grant management. And then we'll also go through the closeout process for closing your grant out. All right, but first off, we just want to kind of differentiate, these are for state funded grants. We also have our federal pots of money as well. And although they're pretty similar in grant management, there are some differences based on state or federal funding. So that's why we wanted to break up our webinars into just focus on the state funded grants, just so you know that these are the things that you will need to do if you're state funded. And as some of you may know, this funding comes through the sporting goods sales tax. And so what that is whenever somebody buys a tennis racket or a baseball mitt, bicycle, camping gear, any kind of sporting good or outdoor activity, purchases, a portion of those sales tax goes into the sporting goods sales tax, which is then funneled to Parks and Wildlife, as well as the Texas Historical Commission. And that helps us fund state parks, but it also helps fund these local park projects, which is really great because, it all makes sense. It helps perpetuate the fund. And so it's a really good program. But one way that you will know for sure that if you have a state funded grant is the fund ID numbers. On all grant agreements and on all correspondence, you'll see a grant fund ID number. And if your number starts with a 54, that means those are for the small communities, and that means it's state funded. For non-urbans, you'll see a 50 at the beginning of your project number, and then for the urbans, it's going to be you'll see a 55 at the beginning of your project number. And so those accounts is the Texas Recreation and Parks account. Those are for small communities and non-urbans. And then the Texas Large County Municipality Recreation and Parks account is just strictly for the urban larger municipalities. So we just want to differentiate that so that you'll know that when you see these numbers, that's what they mean. It means you're state funded and then what program that you are awarded under. All right, so the first thing we want to talk about is the grant agreement. So we really need to get these grant agreements executed. So you have all been awarded and you have your state funding and you've already had site visits with your project coordinator. And so y'all kind of talked about this grant agreement process and during that pre-site visit. But one thing we need to really stress is that our biennium is ending at the end of this month. And so we really need to get these grant agreements executed. So we were talking about the TINS form and the direct deposit authorization forms. If you have not submitted those yet, please go ahead and submit those as soon as you can so that we can get you into our system so that we could actually get this grant agreement executed, because we really need to have these done by the end of this month, okay? And in order to actually sign and execute these, there's really 3 signatures that are required. It's the agreement itself, which Blake kind of mentioned, and I'll go over again. You'll download the initial pages, kind of like you see here on the left. There'll be a signature there. There's also the boundary map. That's really important because, as you know, any project that we put money into, that property has to remain parkland in perpetuity. So it has to be parkland forever. So we definitely want to make sure that we have a good boundary map and that we're all on the same page as to where that property is and what's going to be happening as part of the scope. And then the last thing is that certification of land dedication. That's where we say, all right, this is going to be dedicated in perpetuity, and this will be the final signature that really puts that into place. So let's look at those just so we have an idea what that's going to look like. So you can see here, this is the grant agreement itself, and you'll have a link that will show you that's in Argo 2020. It's under the grant agreement signatures tab form, and you'll be able to download this. And it's just these documents here. So this is what you'll need to download and actually fill out and sign. And then you'll also see the boundary map. And so one really important thing with the boundary map you're going to want to do is really look at the boundary itself. You know, if there's acquisition, want to clearly define that. There's also dedicated open space. That might not apply to everyone, but if your project does have dedicated open space, we want to make sure that that is the correct area and the correct acreage. The acreage is also very important for the total project boundary. And then something else to consider is overhead lines. You know, we really don't like to see overhead lines in our parks. So, you know, sometimes that's unavoidable where, you know, we're not going to be able to remove lines. And then in some cases, we work out an agreement where you are going to remove some of those lines. And so we like to show those on the map just so that we're all on the same page of, hey, these lines are going to be removed or relocated. And if not, we need to show those so that we understand that those are there and we'll be able to reference that into the future. And then the last thing is we like to show, you know, the elements of the project, you know, kind of where they're going to be laid out. You know, this is still pretty conceptual, you know, this is, you know, pre-construction design plans or anything like that, but this just kind of helps give a visual of what we are helping fund for the project and where they're going to be located. And just so that we know what elements are going to be part of the project all in one place on the boundary map. So you're going to want to look at that, make sure that information is accurate. And then if everything looks good, you will sign that and you will attach it to that the grant agreement page I just showed you. And then the last thing is the certification of land dedication. So again, this is the form that says that you're aware that it's going to be dedicated in perpetuity and that you're willing to abide by that benefit of the state. So, and again, all this needs to be put into one document. So as you sign these, I would recommend just scanning them all together so that when you go back in and upload those, it's all in one place. Okay. And so this is what it's going to look like. You know, we have it here where under the grant agreement signatures form, you'll see the link to agreement PDF. That's what you're going to click to get that first agreement pages to sign. And then from there, you'll look down and you see the attachments. You'll see right here it says budget summary, Dallas County, those types of things. But what you will see is you know, the budget summary, but you'll also see the boundary map and you'll see that certification form. So you'll see where you can just download those documents and you'll be able to reference those and then sign them and then scan them back. So if you look at the bottom where it says sponsor agreement upload, choose file, that's where you're actually going to upload the final document once you sign them. And now there's going to be some other attachments that I'd like to mention as well. So there's going to be, these are additional documents, and this is kind of a signature by reference. You know, these are a lot of different forms and a lot of different documents, but we want to make sure that they're part of the agreement, but they don't take a physical signature. But by signing the agreement, you're basically you're saying you're going to abide by these rules. And so the first ones are just the resource review for Parks and Wildlife and from the Texas Historical Commission. We send every project to our biologists to review to make sure there's no sensitive environmental resources or if there are any kind of permits that are required, that's what's going to be listed in that resource review. And then the Texas Historical Commission, we also send it to them to make sure there's no cultural resources that could be impacted by your project. And they may require an archaeological survey or some other review or survey that helps make sure we're minimizing our impacts to cultural resources. So those two things are going to be important to look at. Sometimes your project might not have any concerns, but we'll still upload those basically saying that there's no concerns and that you can move forward without any kind of permitting or anything like that. So be sure to review those. Assurances for state funded awards, that's basically the legal documents and the legal requirements between the state and you at the local level. So that's going to be a lot of the legal jargon that makes sure that we're all on the same page of what's going to be the legal terms of the grant agreement. The instructions for approved projects, that's basically your playbook at the local level. That's what you're going to want to refer to to look at for, bidding, contracting, reimbursement process, any kind of the temporary sign, program sign, all the things that you would need to do and understand to manage your grant. That is your playbook. So that's something good to reference as well. The next one is the local park grant manual. That is basically our playbook at the state of Texas. We have our own manual that that basically gives us our guidance on all of our decisions that we make. So we try to keep that consistent across the board. And so that grant manual is our playbook. So it's good for you to have that so you understand, if we ask you to do something, or if there's a discrepancy or a question that you're not sure about, that's where we're going to go and find the answers. So we just want to make sure that you have that up front in case you want to look at that yourself. And then the last one is the Texas Grant Management Standards. That's basically the state's playbook for managing grants. And so that's a lot of fiscal related requirements and some other standards. But that's basically from the state of Texas and the comptroller, and that's their playbook. So we have to play by their playbook as well. So we just want to provide these. I mean, if you have a problem with insomnia, or you really need to find a way to find some sleep at night, I guaranteed you can look at some of these things and help you out with some of that. But we definitely want to put it on here so you're agreeing to all this by reference, even though it doesn't take signature. So we wanted to make sure we made that clear. And very, very important is no construction can start until we have a grant agreement in place. If you start construction prior to a grant agreement, you're really putting yourself at risk for reimbursement, and you just don't want to do that. You want to make sure that we are all on the same page. We have an agreement in place, and then there's pre-construction tasks that we need to see prior to giving you a notice to proceed with construction. So it's really important to understand that don't start anything until we have agreement in place. The only exception to that is professional services. If you had some design cost up front, say for your application, you had a consultant write your application, or you have some design that's already in the works, or maybe you've had some surveying already done. Say you did an archaeological survey ahead of a grant agreement. That's all great. We can help reimburse those at the 50% rate. But you'll just want to make sure that you have a pre-agreement date listed in your application and that you've worked that out with your project coordinator. But those are the only real costs that we can pay for prior to a grant agreement being executed. So again, stressing it again, no construction can start until a grant agreement's in place. Okay, we're just going to kind of give some of the typical project management tasks, and then we'll have another slide on some of the other tasks that could be associated with your project. But these right here on the screen are pretty much going to be required of everybody on here. If you have an active grant with Parks and Wildlife, you're going to have to work with all these tasks. And when I'm done here, Matt is going to actually go through each one of these in more detail so you understand how it works. But basically, the architectural barriers, that's just making sure that we're following all ADA compliance, stormwater protection, construction plans, that's all pretty self-explanatory. The temporary sign is one that we want to have on site during construction. Permanent's one that's going to be there forever. And then the meets and bounds survey, that's what actually gives a physical reference of your boundary on the ground so that we can find it in 20, 30 years from now when we have to look back at it. But these are requirements that everybody's going to have to deal with. Now, these are some of the kind of outliers that may apply to your project but may not. Again, the Texas Historical Commission, they may say you need an archaeological survey, and so you'll have to work directly with them and provide that survey and get their permits and get their clearance. But we will not allow construction to begin until that clearance has been done. U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is another one that could happen if you have any jurisdictional waters on your property, or you're going to be impacting any kind of streams or wetlands. You might have to deal with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Again, appraisal, if you have an acquisition project, you'll have an appraisal. And since you are state funded, you're going to follow just the normal standard appraisal process through the uniform standards of professional appraisal practice. U.S. Fish and Wildlife, that's if your property might have an endangered species on the property or something to that effect. You might have to work with U.S. Fish and Wildlife to make sure that you've done your surveys and you're not going to be impacting any habitat for endangered species. And then you can read all the rest. A lot of those are just really very specific. The TPW sand and gravel, Edwards Aquifer, aquatic resource relocation, that has to deal a lot with actual in the water bodies. If you're doing any kind of work in a water body, that's when those would apply. And then so the rest are kind of pretty self-explanatory as well. Interpretive signage, we just want to see that the design. We're not trying to tell you what to interpret necessarily. We just want to make sure it's accurate information and that it doesn't conflict with any of our mission or our priorities here at Parks and Wildlife. But we want to see the design before you have those made. The plant list and landscaping plan, that's going to be important if you do have native landscaping in your project. We're a natural resource agency, so we want to make sure that the plant list is, we're only going to reimburse for natives. And so we want to review that and make sure that we're on the same page of which ones we will reimburse and which ones we're not. Because we're not saying you can't plant non-natives, we're just not going to reimburse for it. And then the open space dedication, again, that's if you are going to set aside a dedicated area in as part of your project that's going to be left more untouched and very natural processes. And so we'll go into detail on that again later. But these are just some outliers that may apply to your project, but then again, it may not. All right, so we want to be pretty clear on timing for some of these different tasks. Some of these tasks, I think this slide does a really good job of explaining some bureaucratic process. Basically, some of these tasks do involve the federal government, again, with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers or the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Some of those permits and those clearances can take up to a year. We've seen it where it even took longer. So coordination with those folks definitely takes time. And so you're going to want to account for that in your timelines and your construction timelines, because again, we're not going to allow a notice to proceed. We're not going to give you the green light to start construction until all these permits are in place and all the clearances have been documented. So if you do have a federal requirement, make sure you plan ahead and start as soon as you get your grant agreement to start getting those permits and that process started. Then at the state level, with Texas Historical Commission or even us at Parks and Wildlife, if we have some permits with our, the aquatic resources, those types of things, those can still take months, because we have to get it set up, we have to get you in contact, we have to come up with a plan, and then we have to execute. And so, and a lot of times that involves outside partners, even outside of the state, whether that's subject matter expert or a consultant or a contractor or something to that effect. So those can take months. And so again, account for that in your timelines. And then some of the other lists, other tasks, like plant list or interpretive signage, program signage, even construction plans, we're usually pretty good at turning those around pretty quickly. But you still want to make sure that, you're not saying, hey, we've already gone out to bid, here's my construction plans, I need it done by the end of the week, because we have a ton of projects that each one of our coordinators are managing. And so we're very busy, but we're really good at time management. But at the same time, we want to make sure that we're being fair to everybody. So if you allow us the time to review those, we'll make sure we get a prompt review of those, but just don't expect it like within the day or within a couple of days. Give it at least a couple of weeks to make sure that we can all look that over and get that workflow started. All right. So that's just kind of some expectations for timing for some of these tasks. All right, so what is that going to look like? We've kind of looked at this form a few times during the presentation, but all project management tasks performed are in RGO. In the past with old Argo and some of the limitations we had, we would take some things through email or other ways just to make sure we can keep projects moving along. Well, for accounting purposes, we want everything done in the system now. And this system is going to be a whole lot better at doing that. And it all starts with this project elements form. So in this project elements form, you'll see the required document that you'll have. Like here, you'll see the AP 152 TINs and direct deposit, but something else you'll see is like the TDLR registration or TCQ stormwater permits or construction plans and specifications. You'll see that required document. And something that's really, really nice about the system, and one of my favorite features, is you can actually hover over whatever that required document is, and it's going to be a link. And our staff, we've put together technical guidance documents that you can actually click on that link and it'll give you examples of what we're looking for. And it's all right there for you so that you know where you can either find the information, how you need to navigate the process, or what the kind of form we need you to upload needs to look like, right? And we might even have some description there, you know, if there's something specific for your project, or something we want you to know specifically for that task. We might write a little note in there for you, so you might have some better guidance there. But once you have those tasks completed, you'll see where it says sponsor upload. That's where you're going to choose the file and you'll upload it. And then once you upload it, you can just press the save button, and then we're going to get a notification that that's been submitted. And so when we get that notification, we'll go in and we'll look at it. We'll click the link. We'll see what you provided. And then that's when we decide, we come up with our determinations, right? So if we look at it and we say, hey, this isn't really complete, or this isn't exactly what we're asking for, we're going to click on that changes required button there. And then we're going to write in some comments there in the modification required comments. You know, we'll write in there, you know, hey, you uploaded the wrong document. Please upload this, or could you change this about what you've done, or whatever the case is. So you'll see that changes required come through. And if you do, if you look to the left, you'll see the green check marks. If it's a green check mark, that means it's been approved. There's nothing done. That's where it says verified and complete. You know, that means you're done with that task. But if there is a change that's going to be required, we're gonna give you you'll see a red X there, showing you that there's still something that needs to be done for your project. All right. So that's just the very simple flow on that for project elements, and that's how that's going to go. But let's keep moving along here. The next section is going to be, Matt is going to pick up, and he's going to give you the real details on how these different tasks work and what we're going to be looking for.
Thanks, Aaron. Hello, everyone. My name is Matt Fugray, and I'm a grant coordinator. I do recognize a few names in the attendees list, so I'm glad to see it. As Aaron laid out, there are a number of project management tasks that we require. In this portion of the presentation, we're going to be going over these tasks in a bit more detail. One of the project management tasks is project registration with Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation, or that's TDLR for short. TDLR registration is required for all projects. This registration is meant to ensure that the project meets federal and state accessibility standards under the ADA and the Elimination of Architectural Barriers Act. Now on this slide, you can see a screenshot of the TDLR website, as well as links that can be used to help get your project registered. Once you do register, you will receive a registration confirmation page from TDLR. Now this page includes your project specific number, and this is really what we want to see, the document that should be uploaded in RGO 2020. Providing proof of registration will meet our requirements, but we do want you to note that it is up to the sponsor to hire a registered accessibility specialist. We typically refer to that as a RAS, and that a RAS final inspection report may be required to ensure the project meets accessibility requirements. Another project management task required of all projects is the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, or TCEQ. Stormwater permit for construction activities. In this slide, you can see a screenshot of TCEQ's website. A link to this website is also provided. Although this task is required of all projects, the specific requirements may vary according to size of the project and its potential area of disturbance. I'm going to go into that in a little more detail in the coming slides, but just be aware that specifications for the TCEQ stormwater permit can be included in construction plans. To facilitate receipt and review of the stormwater permit, TCEQ utilizes an electronic document receiving system with the conveniently Texas appropriate acronym of STEERS, or the State of Texas Environmental Electronic Reporting System. Once again, the sponsor is responsible for submitting and ensuring TCEQ's requirements are met. Now, as noted previously, the stormwater permit requirements do vary by level of site disturbance. According to TCEQ, there are 3 categories: sites with disturbance less than 1 acre, sites with disturbance between 1 and 5 acres, and sites with disturbance greater than 5 acres. On this slide, you'll see a flow chart that can be used to determine your project requirements. Don't worry if you're initially confused by the flow chart. I'll be going over the requirements in the following slide. However, I can say congratulations to those projects with disturbance less than 1 acre. You are exempt from the permit. You will still be required to note this in RGO 2020, however. Sites with disturbance between 1 and 5 acres are considered small construction activities. In order to receive the TCEQ permit, these sites will be required to file a notice of intent and a general permit. Moreover, sites with disturbance greater than 5 acres are considered large construction activities. And in addition to filing a notice of intent and a general permit, are required to provide a stormwater pollution prevention plan, or SWPPP. Links to the website of each respective category are located on this slide. In your pre-agreement meeting, you may remember your grant coordinator mentioning that we submit recommended projects to the Texas Historical Commission, or THC, for initial review as part of the award process. If a survey has been conducted in the past, or there are known to be no archaeological or historical resources at the site, THC will provide project clearance at this time. For those projects, this clearance is enough. However, for projects not provided initial clearance, an additional historic resources survey conducted by professionals such as a licensed archaeologist may be required. If additional survey work is required, it will be noted on your THC review summary. Any additional survey work is the responsibility of the sponsor. However, do note that the cost of the work can be reimbursed as professional services. If your project requires additional survey work, please refer to the link provided on this slide to get started, or feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions. Once a survey has been performed, a report will need to be submitted to THC for concurrence. And that's really what we're going to be wanting to see, is that concurrence letter from THC. In order to ensure all grant elements and sustainability requirements are included in the project scope, we do require 100% signed and sealed construction plans for each project. Plans may be sealed by an architect, landscape architect, or engineer. For standalone pre-manufactured items, such as pavilions or playground equipment, manufacturers can often provide the signed and sealed plans. Here it is helpful to reiterate that no construction should occur prior to receiving the notice to proceed, or the NTP is what we usually refer to it as from us. The NTP will not be provided until the plans and specs have been approved. For those projects purchasing items from a purchasing co-op, an example being buy board, manufacturer cut sheets are acceptable. As Aaron noted, if your grant includes funds for landscaping, we do have some specific requirements. First of all, only native plants are eligible for reimbursement. As I like to tell my sponsors, you can plant whatever you want, but as a conservation organization, we're only going to reimburse you for planting native plants. To ensure that only native plants are reimbursed, we do require that a plant list, usually located in the landscape plan, be submitted for approval prior to planting. We will review the list and determine what is native and eligible for reimbursement and what is not. For those who are not master naturalists out there, a really helpful tool for determining native species is the native plant database provided by the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center. And a link to that database is found on this slide. Additionally, we will verify the plant material during the final inspection. We do have one exception to the native plant requirement, and that's Bermuda grass may be used and reimbursed if planted within designated ball fields, but only within designated ball fields. In order to ensure that the projects are progressing in a timely manner consistent with our program, we do require a quarterly status report, or what we call the QSR, to be submitted for each project. A QSR is due on or before the 15th of January, April, July, and October. As a reminder, you will receive an email notification from RGO 2020 2 weeks prior to the deadline. All QSRs will be submitted through the RGO 2020 business management system. Now, you may remember that my colleague, system analyst Blake Powers, presented the procedures for submitting the QSR and RGO 2020 earlier. For reference, you can refer back to the slide on this presentation. Got a little fly in there. Now, as a conservation organization, we also try to incentivize conservation through this program. So during the scoring process, applications receive points for proposals which provide conservation or natural open space that is 2 acres or larger in size. This is what we call dedicated open space. So dedicated open space is one of the most commonly misunderstood concepts in our program. When we talk about dedicated open space, what exactly do we mean? So to our program, open space or dedicated open space is a special designation of an area of land and or water, and typically this is of a healthy native ecosystem that will be protected from most human development in perpetuity. The most common examples are wooded areas of a park or native prairies in a park that would be kept in a natural state or restored to a natural state. Limited development, such as trails, is permitted within dedicated open space. However, common park elements such as dog parks, sports fields, play areas, manicured lawns, and native landscape areas are not eligible to be dedicated as open space. Although not all of your projects will have dedicated open space, for those that do, there are some specific requirements. First, projects with dedicated open space require a special resolution. This, quote, resolution as evidence of protection for dedicated natural areas, natural open space, and or wetlands, unquote, must be adopted by the governing body, such as a county court or city council, and uploaded to RGO 2020. As Aaron pointed out, a link to the sample resolutions is included. Well, this is included on the slide, but it should be included with the task as well. Second, the area dedicated as open space must remain open, natural space relatively free of man-made structures. To ensure that the area is defined, and so we can locate the dedicated area during a compliance inspection, the area of open space must be included on the meets and bounds survey and on the official boundary map. A lot of projects include signage, and some of it are actually required. And as far as in terms of signage, we do have some requirements. So a temporary sign is required for all projects. The temporary sign should be a minimum of 4 foot by 8 foot. Examples of temporary signs can be found in the item request email you received from RGO 2020. Moreover, the required verbiage for the sign can be found on page 24 of the instructions for approved projects packet you received attached to your grant agreement. Now, again, I like to explain to my sponsors that the required verbiage is what has to be included on the sign. However, feel free to add additional elements like logos or conceptual renderings to the sign as well. We do require that a proof of the temporary sign be sent to us via RGO 2020, just like everything else, for approval prior to fabrication. The temporary sign should be placed on site prior to construction and removed prior to the grand opening of the park. We also require a permanent sign or plaque to be installed at every one of our projects. Like the temporary sign, examples of the permanent sign can be found linked on to the RGO 2020 item request. As there's also a template and required verbiage found on page 24 of the instructions for approved projects packet. Also, like the temporary sign, additional info beyond the required verbiage, such as a seal, council board members, project funders, etc., is also acceptable. We also do require that a proof of the permanent sign is uploaded to RGO 2020 for approval prior to fabrication. Unlike the temporary sign, the permanent plaque size is smaller. So that's an 18 by 24 inch minimum. And it must be on site in perpetuity. So you'll likely want to make sure it's durably fabricated. Some common materials that are used are cast aluminum plaques. We've also seen a lot of screen printed metal signs. We also do recommend that they are installed in a relatively safe location. If the permanent sign is stolen, defaced, or no longer legible, you will have to replace it. So not all projects have interpretive signage, but for those that for those of y'all that are unsure what constitutes an interpretive sign, a simple definition is anything that provides information about the natural or cultural environment on site. So if you need any further clarification on that, please feel free to contact your grant coordinator. The design, format, and content of the interpretive signage is really largely up to the sponsor. Although the requirements are not as strict for the temporary signage and permanent signs, we do require that a proof of the signage be uploaded to RGO 2020 for approval prior to fabrication again. In this case, we're not looking for any specific required verbiage, but again, as Aaron pointed out earlier, we're looking to make sure that the content is scientifically accurate and supports the Texas Parks and Wildlife mission. Now, another one of our more misunderstood requirements is a meets and bounds survey map. A meets and bounds survey is required for all projects. The purpose of this is to delineate and create a record of the actual boundary that will be dedicated as parkland in perpetuity. Meets and bounds survey maps are most commonly provided by a licensed surveyor. However, they do not have to be. We also accept a CAD generated map created by a city engineer, for example. The existing meets and bounds surveys, even if they are a number of years old, are perfectly acceptable, as long as the project boundary can be clearly identified. Moreover, if your project site has received federal or state funding in the past, we may already have a survey on file. So for projects that fit this description, I do recommend contacting your grant coordinator to determine if we have on file, what we have on file will meet our requirements. So this concludes my portion of the presentation. For the remainder, I'll be turning it over to my colleague, Susan Sharp.
Hey everyone, I'm just going to grab control of this. All right, hi everyone, my name is Susan Sharp. I'm a grant coordinator with the local park grant program. Been here for about 4 years, and I'm the last person to be talking today, so you've almost made it. Congratulations. The first thing I'm going to be talking to you about today are scope change amendments. Scope change amendments are a change to the project scope that will result in a different element being constructed with grant funds. This means that you are changing the construction elements that you will see in your project budget. You can see the little screenshot there with the green. We have exercise equipment, a pavilion, and a play area in this sample budget. Were you to take the exercise equipment out of the grant scope and add parking, you would need to have a scope change amendment in place. When you're requesting a scope change amendment, please remember that you need to get this approved by local park grant staff, by your grant coordinator, before you make this change or do this construction. Not all scope change amendment requests can be approved. So for instance, we cannot approve a scope change amendment request that would, for instance, significantly alter the scope of the grant project to the point that had the application come in with these changes, we wouldn't have funded it. So if you scored most of your points in sustainability and that's what got your score up high enough to be funded, and you take out all of your sustainability elements, you know, we would have to do a rescore of the grant application and make sure that your overall score is higher than the lowest scoring application we funded that year. We can't drop your project below the funding line and have a potential application that we didn't fund with a higher score. So that's the limit on what we can and can't approve. We can work with you on these though. So if you know you need parking in this hypothetical example and something's got to go, we could work with you to say, yes, you can totally remove this piece of this grant element and put it in parking. We could say, no, you can't. We could say, you have to keep some of this and add a little bit of parking. So we will work with you in the event that you need to do that. Okay. So you don't need an amendment request for every change that you might be making to your project. So you don't need an amendment request when you are only changing the dollar amounts associated with a line item and the total construction budget remains the same. So for instance, in the same example, if your exercise equipment was originally estimated to be just $50,000 and it turns out, whoops, it's going to be $60,000. And you realize you can get your play area done for $50,000 instead of $60,000, you can just swap those numbers around and include that in your reimbursement request. We do not need to do a scope change amendment to reflect dollar amount expenditure changes within items in the construction budget. However, if you are curious, you can always contact your grant coordinator if you're curious about this. If you say, hey, we're going to only spend $5 on one native plant and that got us all of our conservation points. You know, there are some situations where you might want to check with your grant coordinator first and make sure that everything's kosher. So how to request an amendment. The full instructions are online on Recreation Grants Online. You'll just click the resources tab, click Argo 2020 awarded active projects, click how to submit an amendment revision request, and Blake's lovely video will pop out and show you exactly how to do it. So this is new for our grants that are funded this year. So for state grants that were approved in the 2021 Texas Parks and Wildlife Commission meeting, we will not be doing any time extension amendments. This is new. This is a change from previous policies, and it's going to affect state grants approved at the May 2021 Texas Parks and Wildlife Commission meeting and going forward until we tell you the policy has changed again. So the reason that we are not allowing time extension amendments is because we have changed the period of performance in your grant to account for the full amount of time that you have to truly get things done. In the past, we had 3 years with an option to extend for a 4th year. We are incredibly fortunate to have many more projects, a lot more money to spend, but that means that we have to find ways to make efficiencies where we can in our project management, and this is one of those ways. So we are just building in your full time in your grant agreement from the get-go. This means that all of our grants that were funded and received a notification of award at the May 2021 Texas Parks and Wildlife Commission meeting will have an active grant period that goes until April 30th, 2025. We cannot go beyond that. That's a hard stop. However, you can always finish early. So if you don't need that extra time, there's no problem in, just wrapping things up and finishing your project early. You're certainly allowed to continue to get the project done in 3 years or less. But please do pay attention to this. Again, no time extension amendments for grants approved by the Texas Parks and Wildlife Commission in May 2021 that are using state funds. All right, hope that's clear. So what does that mean for your closeout process? Your construction needs to be fully complete and all of your grant funds, all of them need to be expended no later than April 30th, 2025. This is for grants funded with a notification of funding in May 2021. I know there are some folks on the webinar who have grants, state-funded grants that were funded in previous years. But so for this cohort of grants, you've got until April 30th, 2025 to spend every single penny associated with your grant project. That includes your match and the grant portion. You have to spend 100% of the full budget by April 30th, 2025. After you've done that, we will come out and do a final inspection. And so this has to happen no later than July 1st, 2025. So you have a little bit of time from expending your funds and completing your construction to coordinate this visit. If you've requested full reimbursement before this point, just know that 5% of your reimbursement will be withheld until the final inspection is complete, and there are no remedies or changes to be made to what we find on site. So that has to be done. The final inspection has to be done by July 1st, 2025. Then if you have not requested your full reimbursement yet, you have to submit your full request no later than July 15th, 2025. This is a drop dead date. We cannot give any extensions. We cannot give any advances of grant funds. We cannot get you the money. You have to submit your reimbursement. You have to expend your funds by April 30th, 2025, and submitted everything, all your payouts. You have to gather everything from your contractors, any force account labor, any volunteer labor, that all has to be put together, substantially complete to the best of your ability by this date. This is a drop dead date. I know we've been able to advance some grant funds in the past. That is going away. That ability will not be here. So I'm just telling you now so that you know this. 7/15/2025, drop dead date for any outstanding financial information. But then, as you can see with my happy little green people there on the last icon, your project will be complete. And that's why we're all in this, and that's why we're all here today, is to get these parks built and to complete these projects and to create these amenities for our communities. At the final inspection, we will be walking the site with you. Your grant coordinator will come, and we'll just look and make sure that all of the grant elements that are included in your grant scope and on your budget are on the ground, that they're installed, and that there's nothing left to be done. We will be looking for the permanent project sign at this time. So please do make sure that this is something that you've fabricated and installed and gone through all of our processes first. That's the element that is most typically missing at the end. It's something that folks tend to put off, along with interpretive signage and landscaping. So please do make sure that all of these things are installed, they're on the ground by the time your final inspection is scheduled. And then if you are going to hold, say, a ribbon cutting or a groundbreaking at any part of this process, do let us know. We like to attend. We can say a few words. We can tell you how great your park is. It's a really great opportunity for us to continue building the relationship with you as the local grant sponsor. And obviously the community just always loves the opening of a new park. So if you're going to do that, please reach out to your grant coordinator and we will attend if we can. So again, just back to timing your closeout process. April 30th, 2025 sounds like it's a long time away, but you really need to think now about how you will expend all funds by that date. So you need to consider your specific project management tasks, weather events that could occur, changes and fluctuations in material costs, labor availability, and staff turnover. So these are the things that tend to result in project delays. Hurricanes, freezes, floods, almost every project has been affected by a weather event in the past, well, at least since I've been here. So, learn to expect those and never assume that your construction schedule is going to finish on time, because we know that there are hurricanes, we know that there are floods. And, we didn't know that there would be this huge winter snap this year, but it's always something. So do build that time into your project schedule. And with your project management tasks, again, I'm going to refer you to the slide that Aaron went over that shows how lengthy some of those pre-construction tasks can be. So really get a move on those. If you have anything that's going to be reviewed by the federal government, or if you have any processes that are going to require review from another agency, start on those now. And then we've also seen recently some project delays due to changes in fluctuation in material costs and labor availability. So if that is something that you're experiencing, we really need you to know that before the very end of the project so that we can do a scope change amendment that is doable and workable and meets the spirit of the grant agreement. If I would really recommend, this is not something that is in writing anywhere, but I would really recommend being under construction with at least a year to spare, so that you'll know what the bid costs are. If we need to do value engineering, we have plenty of time to address that and make sure that your project is going to work for your community, it's going to work within the financial bounds of our grant program, and it's going to work within the, just programmatic and big picture strictures of our grant programs. Is the park going to be the park that the community wants? So we can work with you on those, but it's just really something to consider. And then the last thing that tends to happen that slows down projects is staff turnover. It happens, folks leave, they go to different cities, they leave the state, they go to the private sector, someone else comes in. It happens a lot. So when the project gets fully put down, when there's staff turnover, we realize that sometimes that becomes a race against the clock when the new person comes up to speed. So if you do leave, make sure that your documents and everything is in a good place for the person who comes after you. So once your project is complete, your relationship with us isn't over. Lucky you. Once your project is complete, though, your park is there. Go enjoy it. Go just have fun in your outdoor space that is going to be serving your community in perpetuity. After your project is completed, we'll still be coming by about every 5 years to check out your park and make sure that it's there. We'll ask you to give us a brief report on your park and how it's going about every year for the first 5 years after your grant closes. This is a really good opportunity for us to gather data about how things are working out in the field. If the hot new commodity for, say, 2017 grants is no longer working, we want to know about that, and we want to be able to, communicate that and be a resource to folks who are putting together their project scopes going forward. And we are going to be checking that you are maintaining your grant elements. So grant element maintenance, each recreational item and support item that you have in your grant scope needs to be outside in the ground, well maintained and working for 25 years for all outdoor elements. And this is actually pushed up to 40 years for pools and indoor facilities. And during this, we're going to be coming out and inspecting it and making sure that things are on the ground. And, finally, the big point of our program is that this is parkland dedicated in perpetuity. And so what that means is that there's no non-recreational elements on site. The park hasn't been converted to a water treatment plant or a Taco Bell. It's still a park. We're looking to see that the park is safe and open to the public, that people can get there and they're not going to be hurt. We just want to make sure that it's maintained and safe. We're going to look and see that the permanent sign is in place. And we're going to make sure that the boundaries are protected. Aaron talked a lot about making sure you understand where your boundaries are when you're signing your boundary map. And Matt talked a lot about making sure that your permanent sign is in a safe place. And the reason why is because these need to be intact in perpetuity to come. And, you know, throughout this process, we'll still be coming out and doing an inspection and making sure that everything's kosher. And the parkland being dedicated in perpetuity truly is the heart and soul of this program. We have over 3,000 sites across the state that have received this funding and are dedicated as parkland in perpetuity. So if you have a lot of project management tasks to complete, if you have a struggle with a contractor, if you are faced with a flood and are scrambling to get the project done, you can rest easy because you can know that this park and that your work going into this project is going to have payoff for decades, and that there are people who aren't even born yet who are going to be able to enjoy the fruits of your labor. So really keep that end goal in mind. I know I do. It's truly a great legacy to be a part of. And with that, I will now open the floor for some questions. So if there's something that you haven't asked that you would like to throw into the comment box, I will keep my mic on and do some answering, and the folks at Airport Commons Park can also chime in if they would like to. I may also read some of these as they come in case you haven't seen them. So we did get a question about landscaping and if it needs to be included in the construction phase of the application of the project management task. And no, you can provide a plant list later. Oftentimes construction plans and specifications will have that as a part of it. But you can always submit them later if you need to. We also had a question about hydromulch, which is going to be the same as any other native plant species. We're going to look at what the seeds are in the hydromulch, and if they're native, you've got the go-ahead, and if it's Bermuda grass, you've got the go-ahead if it's a ball field. We had a question about the TCEQ stormwater situation, stormwater prevention plans, all of that. How to get the contractors to get those documents to you. My suggestion is that you work with the contractor to get a copy of those documents and that you submit them on Argo 2020 yourself. And just do that as soon as you can. And maybe ask the contractor if you can have those or put it into the contract to make sure, because sometimes we have folks running around at the end that are trying to do that. We had a question about if the contract is in the project elements form yet. No, those shouldn't be in the project elements form. You'll see that, you'll be notified of that when it is available. Your project elements form should have your APN TINs form in it so far. So if you haven't submitted that, please go ahead and do it. And some of us may have started populating your project management tasks that are available to work on now there as well. But that's where you will be looking for all of your various tasks. And what's in your project elements form will obviously conform to the specifications of your project. Well, I'm not seeing any other questions. Are we sure there aren't any others here that you'd like to get while we've got so many folks listening in? Ooh, can we get a copy of the PowerPoint? Yes. We will have a copy of the PowerPoint and a recording of this webinar on the Argo 2020 resources page. So when you go into Argo 2020, you'll see the resources tab at the top right-hand corner. You'll click that. You'll find the local parks page, and usually those are right up there at the top. Who reviews the final 100% plans from TPWD? That will be your grant coordinator. So if you're working with me, that means that I will be downloading your construction plans and specifications, getting into the detail. I mean, truly, we really do look at these to make sure that they're in accordance with the grant scope. But primarily what we're going to be doing is looking for assurances within the plans that everything that's in the project scope, every line item in your construction budget is going to be represented on those plans. And if not, so if you're going to do the landscaping separately, if you're going to do some small purchases, you know, for some smaller items or punch list items, that we have a plan for that, that we know that those are coming, and that we're in communication about it. The other thing that we look for in the construction plans and specifications are things that are major omissions. So for instance, if you have a splash pad, we're going to be looking to see where the water is going. If you have things that require utilities, you know, and we don't see any way that for the utilities to get there, you may receive a comment from your grant coordinator about those. And what types of modifications comments are usually provided from you guys? Speaking for myself, I would say that I probably approve 75% of construction plans and specifications with no comments, no modifications within a couple of days of receiving them. If I have questions, I will reach out and see if I'm missing something. I mean, sometimes these documents are so long that a detail here or there might get mixed. So like for instance, I had one grant project that had low impact development parking, and I couldn't quite tell if the parking in the construction plans and specifications was conventional or low impact. And it turns out I just missed a page. The other major thing that we will ask for revisions is if your 100% construction plans and specifications are not signed and sealed. And I've also had signed and sealed like 90% plans that have almost squeaked by. So sometimes we just make sure that we've got the full 100% version and that it's signed and sealed by a qualified professional. Usually they're pretty minor by the time that you've gotten there. And they should be minor if you've been filling out your quarterly reports and keeping us apprised of project progress along the way. We have a question about, I'm not able to find reimbursement requests for my grants. Is that because they are migrated application status? So yes, we have several people who are on this webinar today who have projects that were funded earlier and that have made the transition from the old Argo to the new Argo. And so there's still a few things for those migrated projects that we're catching up on. And so they have to be verified. And if your project is pushed into the active status, you'll receive an email notification and your reimbursement activities should be unlocked, if you will, on Argo 2020. The next question is, after the agreement is signed and approved, we need to have the other tasks completed before construction begins. Do we need the approval for construction from you? Yes, you need approval to begin construction. There are some tasks that can be submitted or fulfilled after construction. The common post-construction tasks would be things like sometimes there's additional landscaping, sometimes there's signage, sometimes there's, you know, you're installing just little doggy stations around your trail, little things like that. And we will set up your project elements form to capture those. But there are some tasks that really do need to be completed before we're going to give you a notice to proceed. The number one thing is going to be construction plans and specifications for all projects. But if your project has some special environmental considerations, some special historical considerations, if you need an archaeological survey, we're going to want to see those come in first. The other common task that we need to see before construction would be an appraisal if your project involves land acquisition. We want to make sure that the construction budget and the match and all of that works out. These are really good questions. Let's see. Are there ever additional grant funds available? No, we cannot change the ceiling on your local park grants. That's just not something that we're able to do. We do have projects that will come back into our program with applications for phase 2 or phase 3, or I don't think I've seen a phase 4. Oh, yes, actually, I know Matt is working with a project that's on phase 4 or 5. So that is going to be your more likely scenario. If you need to receive additional grant funds, you're going to have to go through the whole application process again. The funds, these state funds come from the Texas Recreation and Park account or the urban account. They are subject to legislative appropriation to our program. We don't have the authority or the ability to change your grant amount once, well, really ever. We do have if you're on our newsletter, if you're signed up for a newsletter, you will receive notification of new grant rounds being available. We usually get our applications published and active and ready for you 2 to 3 months ahead of the application deadline. And we will let you know about sometimes some other special programs that come up that we can administer. So if you're not signed up for our newsletter, I would go ahead and get on that, because we do distribute some pretty important information that way. You can find that by going to our website on the Texas Parks and Wildlife webpage. So actually, if you just Google Texas Parks and Wildlife local park grants or recreation grants, your first second Google result will be our page. And then just, I think it's the contact page, scroll down, sign up for our newsletter, bada bing, bada boom, you're signed up. I'm not seeing any other questions here. So, regarding the TCEQ stormwater pollution, if it is a small site that may not require a permit, could the flood plan administrator provide a letter stating it is not needed? I think that would be an excellent way to show compliance with the TCEQ stormwater pollution process for small sites. I think that would be an excellent way to demonstrate that. And we do have instructions for those. So if you have the TCEQ permit added to your project elements form, if you click that, it'll download a document that shows what you need to do. So anyway, here's our contact information. You can contact all of us, but especially Dan. He loves to answer emails. We do have one open spot on our team for the compliance coordinator. So hopefully here in the not too distant future, we'll have a new team member who you can contact for any questions regarding especially your long-term compliance, so those perpetuity questions, your boundary map questions. If you have questions about what grants may have been given to your city in previous decades or really centuries. I mean, we've been around since 1964. So there's always a possibility that your community has past grants that you don't know about. So we should be hopefully submitting an announcement of our new person here in not too long. But in the meantime, we can all answer questions about all of the material we've covered today. Of course, your grant coordinator is going to be your first point of contact for almost anything. So that's me, Matt, or Aaron primarily. If you have questions regarding the Argo 2020 system that you can't find on the resources page, you'll want to reach out to Blake. He is incredibly responsive and so helpful in getting folks what they need and showing them where they need to look for certain things. And if you have any questions that are above my pay grade, definitely talk to Dan. And the fiscal contact information was on an earlier slide. And again, we will have a copy of this presentation available for you. It will go out on the Argo 2020 local parks folder in the resources page. And again, a recording of the webinar, if you would like me to, if you'd like our lovely voices to put you to sleep at night, that'll be there too. So please do use those resources. We spent a lot of time putting them together and trying to make it as foolproof as possible. So please play around on there, find some additional, find your technical assistance, find your quick start user guide, and really get to know Argo 2020. It's an incredibly powerful system that we are really excited to push all the way through with your grant agreement. So I don't think there's going to be any more questions. I might just ask the folks over at headquarters to jump back on and wrap up the presentation.
Thanks, Susan. Let me go ahead and I'll leave Susan's screen up, but that'll conclude the webinar for today. So this webinar will be posted to the local park grant resources within the next 5 to 7 days. It could be sooner, but you just want to check back there, and you'll find links to both the webinar and the PowerPoint within that time frame. So thanks everybody for attending today's webinar. And again, if you have any questions, be sure to reach out to our office, and we'll be happy to respond and help you manage your grant project successfully.